However, that may be true.
Is that funny, Brian? Okay, guys, so the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to read off what the correct answers should be so that you can double check your grade cam sheet. Number one.
Are we keeping these or turning them in?
Oh, you are turning these back in to me. However, what I would like for you to do is get out a separate sheet of paper, and you are going to correct only the ones that you missed, okay? I'm going to work out the ones that were missed, and you're going to correct it only if you missed it. You'll copy down what I do on a separate sheet of paper, and you're actually going to staple that sheet of paper on top of your packet.
And this is our test
Yes.
corrections.
I probably shouldn't say that.
Okay. So number one should have been C. Number two was C. Number three was B. Number four was D as in derivative. Number five was B. Number six was C. 7 was C. Number 8 was A. 9 was A. 10 was D. 11 was B. 12 was B. 13 was A. 14 was D. And 15 was D. So just double check your grade chem sheet for me. And then I'm going to go through the ones that were missed. And you're going to rework the ones that you missed on a separate sheet of paper for your test corrections today.
I just call myself and read it, so it's supposed to be C.
Where are they?
I know. Just hang tight.
Some of that last time.
So we're going to start with number one. There's really no work to show on number one. So if you missed number one, what I want you to do is just write down number one on your separate sheet of paper. And then the answer to number one should have been C. And the reason is, if you look at the graph, they gave you the function was 4 minus x squared. And they're wanting you to figure out which of these definite integrals represents the area of the shaded region. So we know that the integral should be 4 minus x squared. And the bounds is really what you had to figure out on this one. You just had to make sure that you used your x bounds, which are the x-intercepts from 0 to 2, and the lower bound should have been on the bottom. Now, from what I could tell, most people that missed this problem missed it because they chose letter A. Why is letter A wrong?
Because it doesn't have dx.
It doesn't have the dx. It doesn't have the proper notation. Okay, so just be very careful that you look through each option before you actually choose an answer. So if you missed number one, I want you to put C. I also want you to write out what the expression should look like. 4 minus x squared dx. Then I'm also going to do number two. Number two was the second most missed question on the test. And so if you look at it, the first thing I want you to do to correct it is I want you to rewrite it as x to the negative 2 power. So you're integrating x to the negative 2 power on the interval from 1 to 2. And so the first thing that you have to do when you're finding the antiderivative is to add 1 to the exponent and divide by the new exponent. So it's going to be like x to the negative 1 over negative 1. And we're going to evaluate that from 1 to 2. Before we actually use the fundamental theorem of calculus, I would like for us to simplify and clean this up a little bit. You know that a positive divided by a negative is a negative. And so the whole thing's going to be negative, and then x to the negative 1 power can be written as negative 1 over x. And when you substitute in, you substitute in the 2 first, so negative 1/2. And then you're going to do minus a negative 1 over 1. And so you have negative 1 minus a negative is plus. and I can write that as 2 over 2, getting a common denominator. So my answer should have been 1/2, which was letter C. Now, if you missed number 2, is there anybody willing to share what they did to miss number 2? Bryden?
I put minus the 2 over 2 instead of minus the negative 2 over 2.
And it actually gave you an answer on the multiple choice, didn't it? Yes.
Which is evil.
And anybody else willing to share?
Oh, I didn't take the antiderivative first, so I just put it straight.
That is
Like an idiot.
no, that is not. It's actually something that happened quite often. What letter? Did it give you B if you did
Yeah.
that? Okay, so B was the most picked answer for the people that missed it. So that's not, it's something that is common, that you're not the only person that did it, is my point. So take the antiderivative and then sub in your bounds for fundamental theorem of calculus. All right, so that was number 2, and then number 3, we have to use U substitution on. So for number 3, we have the integral from, well, it's an indefinite integral, isn't it? So no bounds. We're just going to integrate x times the quantity x squared minus 1 to the 4th power. So in this case, my u should be x squared minus 1, which makes du what? Good, 2x dx. And so when I rewrite it, it's going to look like the integral of x squared minus 1 to the 4th. I'm going to move my x down here with my dx because I need to change it to 2x dx so that I can get it in terms of u. Balance it out with a 1/2. Everybody with me so far? And then 1/2 times the integral of u to the 4th du is just going to be 1/2 times u to the 5th over 5. Again, you have to add 1 to the exponent, divide by the new exponent. And don't forget your plus c. And so I went ahead and rewrote mine at this point as 1/10 times the quantity. U was x squared minus 1 to the 5th power plus c. Because I just multiplied, I thought of this as 1/5 times u to the 5th. I multiplied my 1/2 and my 1/5 together to get 1/10. So that answer choice was what? B? Yeah. Answer was B on number 3. Now, no one in this class missed number 4, 5, 6, or 7. So we're going to skip all the way over to number 8. And I'll say number 6, nobody in any class missed number 6, so that was awesome.
What was number 6?
I believe it was just a straight up
Yeah.
antiderivative, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was
Okay. Well, listen, there's just sometimes, I say this all the time, but sometimes there's just days where 2 plus 2 equals 5. And even in the easiest problems, your brain tells you one thing, doesn't it? Okay, so the next one that we missed was 8. 8 was another U substitution. So let's look at number 8 together. It's an indefinite integral. I'm going to go ahead and set mine up as x cubed plus 5 to the 6th power and then move my x squared down with my dx. I'm just thinking a step ahead because I know that my u is going to be x cubed plus 5, making my du 3x squared dx, which means that I'm missing a 3 in front of the x squared. I'm just going to make sure this battery's still.
I feel like my head's in the way.
No, it doesn't have your head in it at all.
It should.
So I'm missing a 3. I'm going to add it in and balance it out with a 1/3. And so I have 1/3 integral of u to the 6th du. What is the antiderivative of u to the 6th power?
1/7.
1/7 u to the 7th, good. And we're going to multiply that times a third. And then add c. So you should have 1/21. U was x cubed plus 5 to the 7th plus c. And so for number 8, you should have chosen A. All right, moving on to number 9, the dreaded trig question. Anybody still writing 8 before I flip the page? All right.
So close. I just didn't get the negative.
That just gets me so
I
angry.
know, I'm so angry about that.
Okay, so I'm taking the integral of sine cubed theta over 1 minus cosine squared theta d theta. And so if that 1 minus cosine squared theta isn't jumping off the page and smacking you right in the face, you don't know your identities, right? You have to know Pythagorean, reciprocal, quotient, all of those identities on that sheet. So what is 1 minus cosine squared equal to?
Sine squared.
Sine squared, right? So sine squared theta in this case. And what is sine cubed divided by sine squared?
Sine of theta.
Sine of theta. And the antiderivative of sine of theta is?
Negative cosine theta.
Negative. Negative or positive?
Negative.
It is negative. Because remember, derivative of cosine is negative sine. So derivative of negative cosine would be positive sine. That's usually when I have to think about it, because depending on what direction you're going in, it's the opposite. So I have to think about it. I always remember my derivatives first. And so if I know my derivative of cosine is negative sine, that helps me decide which antiderivative to use. What letter choice is that? A?
Yes.
Okay. All right, number 10 is the integral from 0 to 5 of f of x dx equals 7, and the integral from 2 to 5 of f of x dx is negative 1. What I want you to write down, if you missed number 10, I want you to write down that the fact that the integral from 0 to 5 has to equal the integral from 0 to 2 plus the integral from 2 to 5. We have to use that property of integrals. And if you use that property of integrals, you know that 7 has to equal x plus a negative 1, right? We don't know what the integral from 0 to 2 is. But if you write it like this, you can obviously see that the integral from 0 to 2 has to be 8. And so that's why the answer choice is D. Now, if I were working this test, I wouldn't write all this stuff down. I wouldn't waste time writing all this stuff out, but that's just the thought process. And I'm having you write it down on your paper because you're just doing corrections. In fact, when you're doing a multiple choice test, you want to get away with the least amount of writing possible, the least amount of steps on the multiple choice section. All right, flip over to the calculator portion. Number 11. On the calculator portion, it says use the graphic utility as an aid in finding the area of the region above the x-axis bounded by f of x. So if I pull up my calculator here,
Yeah.
first thing you want to do is graph it. So go to y equals and type in your function 5x cubed. You may use an 89 or an 84 on this. Minus 35x. I believe it was plus 30, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. In the standard window, you cannot see the entire graph, but you can see that we need to just change the y max to get the entire graph, because this is a cubic function. So I'm going to go to window, I'm going to change my y max to, I think I changed mine to 80. and that gave me a pretty good picture on a scale of 5. So if you missed number 11, what I want you to do is to draw on your corrections. I want you to draw this graph, or sketch it, just a quick sketch, doesn't have to be perfect. And the way it's worded is it says the area under the curve bound above the x-axis. So it's only looking for that little piece right there, that shaded area. And so that shaded area is the integral of f of x dx from this x value to this x value. Now luckily for us, those x values are nice, pretty numbers. They're integers. -3 and +1 if you look at your graph. So the lower bound is -3, the upper bound is +1. And if I go back to my calculator, I can show you on the t-table that -3 is a 0 and +1 is a 0. Now +2 is also a 0, but it's not part of our bound for that particular area. And then if I go back to my home screen, on the 84, if you go to alpha window, you can use number 4 to take the antiderivative. You just type in your bounds, -3 to 1. Type in your function. Thank you. And then I'm going to type in my x. So 160. You may also use the TI-89. Just remember on the 89, to do the integral, you're going to choose the calc menu. Under the calc menu, it's number 2. So I believe we go F3, number 2. Type in the function, comma, x, comma, -3, comma, 1, parenthesis. That's the syntax for the 89, if you prefer to use the 89. And so what letter was 160?
B.
B? All right. Number 12. Number 12 is a position, velocity, acceleration problem. It gives you that the acceleration function is 42. It tells you that the initial velocity is -18 feet. And the initial position is 3. So, it asks you to find the position function. So to get to the velocity, we take the antiderivative of 42, which is 42t plus c. To figure out what c is, you sub in v of 0 equals -18 and find that c is -18. So I'm going to say v of t is 42t minus 18. Then I want to find s of t, the position function, by taking the antiderivative of this. You get 21t squared minus 18t plus c. And to figure out what c is for this function, you sub in 0 for s of t and 3 for t. And you find that c is equal, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. You sub in 3 for s of t and 0 for t, and you get c is 3. So your s of t function is 21t squared minus 18t plus 3.